Welcome back to Take Us McGinnis Elder News Hour. I'm Barbara McGinnis, and in today's episode, we're talking about residential options for older people. How can they help stay in their home longer? And when that's no longer an option, what are their options in the community?
And I'm Tim Takis, and in this segment, we are speaking with Chris Heeren, who's the administrator of NHC Healthcare Hendersonville, and Mary Wester of House Share, both of whom will be offering different options for seniors, which they're actually on different ends of the spectrum. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Mary. So, Chris, you're at NHC, and you offer both long-term care as well as rehab. Correct. So let's talk a little bit about rehab, and tell us some of the misconceptions about rehab. You know, particularly about maybe the 100 days that I'm sure your families come in and ask you about the 100 days. And so tell us a little bit about that. First of all, what is rehab, and then tell us what the 100 days is.
Perfect. Rehab is short for rehabilitation. So when a patient or a resident out in the community has an episode, acute episode such as a fall, they break a bone or a hip, they go to the hospital. And then when they're in the hospital, they're approached by case managers, social workers, that ask them, would you like to go to a post-acute care setting? And that's what NHC Hendersonville does. So after a patient has been in a hospital and they're stable, their pain is under control, they've had their surgery, they need rest. So after 3 days at a minimum, the federal government with Medicare says the patient can benefit from their Medicare 100 days in a skilled nursing facility.
Okay, and now do they always get 100 days? Does Medicare pay for 100 days? Or tell us a little bit about
I love answering this question.
Yeah,
this is
I'm
the
sure
biggest
you hear this all this time, right?
Every time.
Right.
So with everyone in America that works, that pays into the Medicare system, they're entitled to an available 100 days for someone like at NHC Hendersonville to receive physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy. But in addition, the main component is a nursing component, such as wound care, wound dressing, tube feeding, antibiotics, and IVs. So with the 100 days, a resident or a patient is able to rehab for 30, 60, 90 days.
Okay. And the Medicare program pays for all 100 days?
That's another misconception. With the 100 days, a patient or resident is eligible for the first 20 days of the stay within NHC Hendersonville or a post-acute setting to pay at 100% of the bill. After that, on day 21, up until the patient discharges or leaves the center or transitions to a long-term care setting, there's something called a copay where the patient pays part of that.
Okay. And so usually the patient pays that copay out of pocket, or is there insurance for that?
There's multiple ways or pay sources to do that. So if they have a supplemental to Medicare, that also pays. Long-term care facilities can help file the claim, but also if they need to pay out of pocket. And then there's also what choices Medicare or Medicaid and TennCare.
Right. So the Medigap, and we've done a program before about the Medigap policies that would pay maybe for the next 80 days. Is that correct?
Part of that. But Medicare pays 80% of the claim.
Gotcha.
But everybody that comes to you is not on Medicare, are they? Some of them are on private insurance or a Medicare Advantage plan where you're working with other insurance companies. And so your therapist, your clinical staff have to be in touch with the healthcare company, right? And so then it's not always just within the clinician's control or always within the doctor's control, right?
That's exactly correct, Barbara. It's called a Medicare Advantage program. So out in the community, a person has the opportunity to opt out of paying for Medicare, the traditional Medicare, but can also purchase through premiums the Medicare Advantage commercial plan.
So, and then that coordination, I think what we've seen a lot is that the coordination between the clinical staff and the insurance staff, then you get, we're done paying for skilled care, and somebody has to tell the resident.
Correct. So how it works is that NHC Hendersonville and most subacute, we're in communication with those commercial insurance brands with their case managers.
Right.
So they are committed or obligated to follow Medicare rules, just like Medicare guidelines, and then we communicate with them, and it's on them. It's on the onus on the insurance company to dictate when the patients are able to transition home. They determine the length of stay in a subacute setting.
And they get 2 or 3 days notice, right?
Yes, by federal law, they have to give 30-day notice. But what we do on admission, from the very beginning that the patient or resident comes into our center, we talk about discharge. We talk about what are their options in the community. The first thing is to ask the patient, do you want to go home? We want them to be as independent as possible and go home. So we are in communication with the commercial insurance plan on a weekly basis. So it's not so much a surprise to the pay source or to the patient.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we often tell our families is that when their loved one goes into skilled nursing facility, they're worried about what's going to happen while they're there.
That is correct.
You're worried about how do we get them out of the facility into a safe and secure place.
Correct. And if they're not able to go home, we offer long-term care services.
Gotcha.
They can transition to our wing on our long-term care side, assisted living, or other options that are out in the community.
And that's where the Medicaid or the Choices program pays, provided that they meet certain medical and financial criteria.
That is correct.
Is what I understand.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay, Mary, you're offering another residential option?
Yes. The option we're calling House Share Nashville, and it is a different option in that it allows us to partner with a home care or a caregiving company called Whole Care, and they are able to bring in the caregiving services, and it allows the services to be bundled.
How'd you come up with that idea?
It's basically modeled after what we did for my parents. They live in Iowa, and my sister was trying to drive 45 minutes one way to go in and take care of them, and check on the mail, make sure the bills are paid, make sure there was insurance taken care of, and making sure they were getting food to eat, and because she was a pharmacy tech, making sure their cassettes and their medications were done, and that they were actually not forgetting to take the medicine, and that they were taking the right medicine during the day. So she would have to travel 45 minutes each way 3 times a week, and it was just killing her trying to work 45 hours a week and doing that. So a house became available. It was actually a duplex, and she said, Mary, why don't we look at this? And it was perfect. There were no steps, and I bought the property, and we gave Mom and Dad the option to move when one of my tenants moved out.
So who's a good candidate for house share? And how do we get started if you're living in Nashville?
Okay, basically the best option is somebody like us, who my sisters and I, who are basically sandwich generation. We're taking care of our parents and we're taking care of our kids, and we're doing it at a distance. Or even if we're in the same town like we are now, we can't do it all. We just can't do it all. So this gives an option to be able to have somebody coming in 3 days a week or however many times a week that's necessary, and that caregiver can do the written assessments so that we can see the progress and have somebody else independently see what's going on and what the deterioration may be. They can do the medication monitoring, the light cleaning, some laundry on site, and some meal prep, and take away some of the transportation costs or transportation responsibilities.
So what are the costs?
Basically, for 12 hours a week, which is 3 hours a day, or 4 hours a day, 3 times a week, we are modeling it as being about $2,500. It's kind of a Golden Girls independent living option, but by having more people there, they do better than living on their own. And yeah, they can go and do things, they can cook their own meals independently, but if everyone gets to a point where they can't, then we can go up to 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and still cheaper than
Gotcha.
the other.
So we're going to put some contact information on how we can contact House Share and also contact NHC. There it is on your screen.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mary. It's been fun to hear about these new exciting options and to meet again with an old friend and community colleague. Thank you both for being here, and I hope you turn in to right back after this break.